Hello, everybody. So, welcome along to our second of our Unplugged Live series. Today, I'm going to be joined by Happiness Hacker, author, and international speaker Penny Locaso, and I'm really excited for our chat. So, I'm just waiting for Penny to join us, and we'll get started very shortly. I'm really looking forward to this chat with Penny today. I think she's just joined. So just give it a minute or two. Hope everyone's keeping well, minding themselves, whether they are in lockdown 6.0 or whether they're elsewhere in the world. I see Penny has come on. I'm just waiting for her to join in. Perfect.
Hello.
Hello.
How are we?
I'm good. How are you, Penny? Great to see you.
I'm good. I am in lockdown 6.0 here with you.
I know. What a whirlwind.
I know. It's funny, you think because it goes on longer, it might get easier or you might get better at it. And I think you do in some ways, but I don't know about you, but I see that it's like every lockdown that occurs, it's almost like something small chips away at people. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel that, and I can resonate personally with it, but also turning the conversations that I've been having, or through hearing stories from people, that definitely it feels like that. It's kind of that little bit is taken away as well.
Mm, yeah.
Mm.
Bit of a roller
Well,
coaster.
thank you. It is. It is. Someone I heard say the other day that term "corona coaster," and I think that's rang really true.
Like
I was
that.
like, yeah, you can feel that. Yeah, totally can resonate with that. Every day is different. Not quite sure what you're going to expect.
No, and
Um,
I think that is the reality, right? Every day is different, and you don't know how you're going to feel.
no, you don't. You don't. And it's really about meeting, I guess, whatever way you present yourself in that day, and hopefully with a little bit more ease some days. Yeah. So, thank you for joining me here today. It is such a pleasure to be spending some time with you and getting to have this conversation. I am a big fan of all the work that you are doing out in this world, and I think we need it more so than ever at the moment. But before we get into, I guess, a little bit more about you and what you do, what I love to do is start off these sessions first with a bit of a check-in.
Yeah.
So if we were to say on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is feeling like really crappy, not good at all, and 10 being absolutely amazing, where do you reckon you're sitting today?
Oh, honestly, I'm a 9 today, but that's only because I started my morning for myself.
Mm. So what did
Yeah.
that include?
I'm a big believer in how you start your day determines more often than not how your day unfolds. So I have a bit of a ritual and I've been playing with it and changing it since lockdown started. So generally, I get up at 5. I will do half an hour of yoga. That's the first thing I do. Then I'll do probably 15 minutes of meditation. I do about 20 minutes of journaling. And then this morning I did 45 minutes. I did a Pilates class. Um, alternate days I do HIIT classes. So, and then I do half an hour of learning because I've just started studying my master's in psychology. So so it's a lot of time. Like generally, I spend the first 2.5 hours a day on myself. Then I walk the dog and get a coffee. So I don't actually start work until 9 o'clock, but I've already done
Mhm.
like 3 hours for myself, 2.5. And I know not everyone can do that, but I choose to do that. I always say I choose to be selfish in the morning because it makes me a better human, it makes me a better mother, and it makes me way more productive in my day, and it makes me feel good.
Yeah, awesome. Have you always been a morning person?
Yes, I have. Not always 5 o'clock, generally 6 o'clock. And I used to get up and just go and do, a class or go for a run first thing in the morning. It's only probably in the last, year and a half, I read the 5 a.m. Club.
Yeah, I was going to say, I felt like the way that you were talking about how you split your morning up, it
Yeah.
sounded like echoed kind of that method or modality, I guess, that Robin shares in that book. Yeah.
Yeah, so I always had a routine in the morning, and but I've just found just having more structure and actually starting, like I say, with yoga, because yoga's just been, oh, it's kept me sane throughout all of this. Yeah, it just kind of refined it. And some days, I don't do it on weekends. I don't get up at 5 o'clock on the weekends. It's just during the week. And some days I decide to stay in bed because I don't feel like it, and I don't beat myself up for that either. I've learnt to
Yeah.
let that go and just say, you know what, today is just not the day to do it. That's fine. Um, but I think having a routine and having some structure, not the whole day structure, but having some structure in your day when every day really is like Groundhog Day, is really helpful for me anyway.
Yeah, I find that too. I mean, that element of incorporating routine when everything
Yeah.
else feels so out of your grip or out of your grasp, that you have that one thing that, as you said, is just for you, and if everything else falls to pieces and goes to crap, at least you have that and you're starting your day. And I always talk about this too, from the inside out rather than the outside in. And that can make a fundamental shift to how you meet your day and your life for sure.
Yeah, and I don't advocate, like I say, I know a lot of people got small children and things like that, and they can't afford, I've got an 11-year-old son. I'm lucky he's a bit older, a bit independent, but, even if it's 15 minutes for you at the start of the day, even if it's just getting up 15 minutes earlier and not touching the fucking device and actually giving yourself that time to actually start from a place of intention rather than from as soon as you pick up your phone, I find you're reactive, you're responding to things. It's not intentional. So I think, any space you can create at the start of your day where you're not on a device and you're actually starting the day with intention, with something that actually gives you a lift and is meaningful, is really helpful.
Yeah, beautiful. I guess then if we were to take that same scale of 1 to 10 and spread it across the last 18 months, you know, since this pandemic began, where do you reckon you would be sitting?
Oh, see, I wouldn't give you an average. I'd actually say it's like a roller coaster. I can go
Yeah.
from like maybe 3 to 9. And that can
Mm,
be day to day. And I think what's been so interesting for me, I have never in my life suffered from mental health issues. I've always been, pretty positive and yeah, just not challenged with that. But I must say, in the last 18 months, I have really had to work hard to keep my mental health just in check, in balance. I think for me, the real struggle has been I never, I used to spend my time traveling the world. I used to spend my time in rooms with thousands of people connecting and helping them, make change that makes them feel better. And everything I've done for the last 18 months has been online. To be honest, it's been a bit of a soul suck when everything's online. I never realized how much energy I got from that human connection. I think I took it
mm,
for granted. And when that was taken away and I was spending all day, every day, you know, alone with the dog, or with my son and just delivering work online, it really, really impacted how I felt. And I think,
mm.
most of us realize how much that lack of human connection has impacted us. Even just those random conversations with a stranger in the street now are just so valuable, right? So yeah, I think that has, and I'm an extrovert, my energy comes from other people. So that's probably been the thing that's impacted me. And as I say, I've really had to work and find ways. It's why I did my yoga teacher training, right? Because I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to present in front of a live audience for God knows how long, or be in a classroom with people. So what are the other ways I can get human connection? And yoga teacher training is something that I always wanted to do. I was lucky enough; it was in between lockdowns, so I got 5 weeks and met all these amazing humans. And I also teach yoga online now, and just as a gift back to people, helps me practice, helps people feel a bit better in the current environment. And that's another way, even though it's online, I still feel really connected. So I've just gotten
Yeah.
creative to try and resolve that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I totally resonate with that, and especially in terms of that human connection piece. I think we have been very grateful to have the likes of, these devices and Zoom and all of the programs that have helped us keep that face-to-face connection in
Yeah.
some realm, when we have been incredibly isolated. But then in the same vein, I think we've really discounted the impact that having a screen, even still, as a bit of a natural physical, but also a mental and emotional barrier for people too, in terms of even the depth of conversation, even the little, in between moments that you might have when you actually are face to face, and that ability to strengthen those relationships, I think has been challenged. And that Zoom fatigue is a real thing, I think.
Oh,
I think people are really, really suffering from that. I know I am too. At the beginning, it was all fun and games and, wine tastings and quizzes and all the things.
yeah.
But now, it's like any excuse to get outside, and as you said, have that little 2 second connection with the barista or the person who's walking the dog or whoever it may be. And they're actually the meaningful moments in your day.
It's so true. I did I did a podcast a couple of weeks back called Zoomed Out, and it was basically I was so curious about what was going on for people mentally because so many corporate clients that I had were reaching out and just saying people just are maxed out on Zoom, like they are completely, it's burning them out. So I love research. So I started digging to find sort of what research was out there. And just there's so much research in terms of how it cognitively overloads you and exhausts you more so than face-to-face interaction. Like the thing I loved, when do you ever in a meeting sit there and look at yourself for an hour? Right, in a physical meeting, right? And they said even that whether you realize it or not consciously, you're judging yourself, you're fixing yourself, you're looking at yourself. That is cognitively exhausting. It requires so much more brain power to sit there and look at all of the faces on a screen. This is the reason why we feel the way we do. And I don't know about you, but I was talking to a girlfriend the other day, and she said to me, she spends, she's a consultant at KPMG, and she spends all day on Zoom. And she said to me, I don't even want to connect with friends anymore because, and this is where it gets sad, right? She said, because at the end of the day, I'm so fatigued from being on Zoom. I don't want, if connection means sitting there and looking at my friends again for another hour, she said, I'd just rather not. And I think that's where it's starting to get interesting. People are just so exhausted from the video stuff that they don't even want to connect with their friends in the same way as they used to. And I feel it myself, it just feels like more work. And I know that sounds horrible, but I think it's the nature of the beast that we're dealing with, and it's completely new, right?
Yeah, that's it. It's navigating new ground that none of us are used to or aware of, and I think that notion of having to go around your life with a little bit more intention, a lot of this is such new ground for all of
Mm,
us too, that it's difficult to do that. And as you said, it's exhausting. Everything is new. And it's like that kind of same mentality of, when you're babies and you're discovering the world again, it's kind of a little bit like that too, as represented with these new things that I think we all need to go back maybe to those little afternoon naps that we used to have when we were kids just to get through.
it's funny though. I was reading some research the other day on working from home, and they said the three
Mhm.
biggest enemies of working from home are the fridge,
Yeah.
it's sleep, and I can't remember what the other one was. So it was the bed, it was the fridge, and there was something else. And I was like, it's so true, right? It's like you're trying to find things to distract you, to get you off, the Zoom calls, or just to check out for 5 minutes. Because I know I find myself now, like I walk the dog. I'm very fortunate. I live across the road from a big park. I walk the dog sometimes 3 times a day just to
Mm.
clear my head. Or now I take a lot of Zoom calls, but I turn them to audio calls, and I'll walk the dog at lunchtime and do a call because that way I don't have to visually, look at someone, and it's not as taxing. And I don't know, there's something about when you walk and talk that changes the
Mm.
dynamic of a conversation.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. And I know too, I think a lot of people they seem to be missing, and I know at the beginning there was a little bit of that too, that kind of transition time as well as where you would usually have your commute to or from work, or that even the change of clothes that really signal that shift in mentality too. And I think what I'm hearing is a lot of people are finding that balance between home life and work life, or the lines between that signal, I'm in work time and I'm in home time now, are really blurred. And not for the benefit, it sounds
Mm.
like you absolutely have been really intentional on getting that balance and, finding ways to help you navigate that. But I'm finding a lot of people are struggling with that those lines are blurred, and it's, making the dinner and then kind of running back to do the email, and, and then not resting, and over time are actually working more hours than potentially they thought they normally would have. And everyone's wondering why they're exhausted.
Well, I mean, again, when I speak to the leaders of the companies that I work with, and, we're talking,
Mm.
some of the biggest companies in the world, and the consistent thing that I hear is that people are completely burnt out. They're not taking their leave because no one wants to take
Mm.
leave in lockdown, right? Because like, what am I going to do? And because there's not much else to do, they just fill the time with work. And that's why,
Mm.
people are exhausted. I had to make a conscious decision early on because I was just killing myself to try and get the same amount of work done, to homeschool, to maintain my mental health. I surrendered to the fact that I actually had to do less. If I was going to get
Mm.
through this, I actually had to do less hours on the computer, less work, and actually carve out, again, intentional time to fill me up, and to keep my energy at a certain level, because otherwise I just felt I was in a constant state of guilt and not doing enough and not being enough. And that in and of
Mm.
itself is exhausting, and it's a fast track to burnout. So I think that's where the opportunity lies for a lot of us. It's actually putting some more clear boundaries around work
Mm.
at home, and actually saying, I am going to carve out, and I actually schedule it in my diary. I'm going to carve
Mm.
out specific time in the day where I'm not going to let things run into it. That is, and I set alarms, on my phone to remind me so that it's not like I can let it run away from me. But that time is for me to recharge my batteries. I don't think it's healthy. I don't do any workshops. I don't do any talks online that are longer than an hour and a half. I think that even an hour and a half is probably too long to sit in a meeting. People check out, and like I said, it's not productive. It's not valuable time.
No, it looks good on paper, perhaps, having all that extra information or time together. But as you said, if it's not valuable time spent, and if people aren't engaged or aren't interacting, then what good is it? Mm.
And
It's
the other
probably
thing,
just causing more stress in the end because they're thinking, oh, all that work that I could be doing, and then feeling wrecked at the end of it that they can't actually get to do it.
there will always be more than enough work. The work will never go away. The list is never done. And I was talking yesterday, to a leader at PwC, and another conversation I have constantly is, how do we teach our people to say no? Like, companies actually
Mm.
want their people to start saying no. And one of their mantras was stop and take a breath. And I was like,
Mm.
it's sad, but it's the reality is we have to come back to basics and empower people and empower ourselves to put boundaries around our time, for our health.
Mm. That's a really good point. And I think when people think, often of self-care, it can often feel like the bubble baths or the yoga class or whatever it is. But often I think boundaries is number one. And I
Mm.
think that can be such an important thing to start to incorporate into your way of thinking and showing up in the world, to say, what is it that I actually need to say no to? And I heard someone recently on a podcast say it, every time I say no to something, I'm saying yes to myself.
It's
And
so
I
true.
really love that. Yeah, I love that. So how do you go about setting boundaries or clear boundaries?
um,
Mm.
well, my time in the morning is for me. I don't allow anything to creep into that space. That's pretty protected. I had to I created what I called a hell yes list. Because I remember someone reminded me recently and sort of said, that quote of, if it's not a hell yes, it's a fuck no. And I was like, I love that. And so I was like, well, if I create a hell yes list, so what are the things that I want to say yes to? What are the things that are in alignment with my purpose, with the impact that I want to have in the world? Um, what does that look like? What are the sort of the criteria? So I wrote a list, and
Mm.
there's about 6 things on it. I'm just trying to think. It's probably right here in front of me somewhere. And basically, that hell yes list, every time I get an opportunity, rather than saying yes to everything and having this FOMO of, missing out on something. I basically go through the hell yes list. And if it doesn't tick the boxes, not every single box has to be ticked, but if it doesn't tick the majority of boxes, then it's a no. And
Mm.
I think that's the challenge, is that most of us don't have that list. We don't have that clarity on the things that actually are in alignment with the sort of person we want to be, the work that we want to do, the life that we want to lead. And if you don't have that list, then how do you actually evaluate opportunities when they come to you? And how do you start to practice saying no? And that list for me, that hell yes list, has been massively valuable.
What are a few things that are on the list? I'm
Oh gosh,
curious.
it's so funny because it's right here. Let me just pull out my wad of papers. I'm just going to find it because I can read it to you. Oh, would you? Oh no, here we are. Oh gosh, now of course, it's always the way, right? I can't find it. I had it straight in front of me.
Sorry, I totally put you on the spot.
Does it positively impact the lives of others? Are the people that I'm going to be working with trying to achieve similar things or sharing the same values? Does it energize me and make me feel good, or will it deplete me and exhaust me?
Yeah.
Is it an opportunity for me to grow or enable someone else to grow? These are sort of the things that are on that list for me. Does it move me
Love that.
closer to my I have a very clear quest, which is I want to impact the lives of 10 million people and teach them how to adapt with intention in order to make their lives happier, in order to build their mental wealth. Does what I'm doing or what I'm saying yes to move me closer to making that happen? Things like that.
Beautiful. Speaking of, I think a lot of that kind of touches on the impact or the purpose of, why it is that you do what you do in this world. I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that and share, I guess, because it wasn't always that way. I know you've come from a bit of a different background and you've transitioned very intentionally into the life that you live these days. So I wondered if you could share a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, I spent 16 years as an executive in an oil and gas giant. I had a very successful career and never begrudge it. I had some amazing opportunities and worked with some brilliant people all around the world. But I got to the age of 39. Some people call it a midlife crisis. I like to think of it as a midlife awakening. And I kind of, it was a first world problem. I had everything you could ever want. And I ticked all the boxes I was told would make me happy and successful. And I was sitting there going, how come I feel so unfulfilled? I didn't feel complete, if that makes sense. And when I sort of started to unpack that question, I asked myself, what does success and happiness look like for me on my terms? Because what I came to realize was that I had created a whole life on a societal definition of success and never actually asked myself what my own definition of success looked like. And so when I did that, I realized that for me, happiness was found in human connection, in positively impacting the lives of others, being present and in a moment, like really simple things. So I basically, within a 7-month period, turned my whole life upside down in pursuit of happiness. I left the career at the top of my game. I relocated the family from Perth back to Melbourne, left an 18-year relationship and started my own purpose-driven company with the sole intent of helping others find or define what success/happiness looks like for them on their terms, because it's different for all of us, and then helping them build the skills to enable them to inject more of that into each day. And so my purpose now is kind of an evolution of that after 7 years. My sort of core purpose is, how do I help myself find inner peace, and how do I enable others to do the same? And the way that we do that is through building what I call mental wealth. Rather than focusing on mental health, which I see externally is very reactive focused, I'm trying to help people build skills that enable them to have sort of a bank of tools and skills that they can leverage that will enable them to navigate uncertainty and complexity from a place of meaning and intention, which I'm not saying you're not going to have shitty days, but it just means that you have more of the tools available to you, and you have more of the experience and practice to be able to not drop so low, yeah, and allow yourself to bounce back quicker.
You're beautiful. I had a conversation with someone earlier the last week and we were talking about that, how, it's not about pushing away those shitty days because, you know, they're going to happen. And so too are the amazing, incredible days. But it's how do you stay more grounded or have that kind of more even playing field when the highs don't get so high or the lows don't get so low, you know, that it's kind of more little waves rather than
Yeah,
massive peaks, massive troughs. And I think, you know, there is that notion of really reaching for the shiny thing and, you know, I have to be happy and just because I'm not on a day, you know, that's the worst thing in the world. And we beat ourselves up about that because, you know, why do I feel the way I feel? You know, and it's almost like the enemy, the bad guy. But noting that the human experience is actually about feeling it all, you know, and being
without a
allowed
doubt.
and that you can actually have that experience of everything in its entirety, but not be so shaken by it.
It's interesting, you know, someone said to me not so long ago, don't you find it exhausting trying to be happy every minute of every day? And I was like, oh, that's so interesting because I'm a happiness
Mm,
hacker. They think that's what I'm. And it's funny because part of the journey that I've been on is about redefining happiness because I think we're actually sold, you know, a bullshit story around happiness and what it looks like. And so I define
mm,
happiness as being able to ride the wave of every emotion that life throws at you, knowing that you
mm,
have the resources, the support structure, and the skills to come out the other side just a little better than what you were before. And that seems
mm.
to connect with a lot of people. If we can't be if we don't feel the shit stuff, we can't acknowledge and recognize the good stuff, which is the happiness, right? You have to have the lows to appreciate the highs.
Absolutely. You mentioned as one of, I guess, the recipe for defining happiness or a life of contentment for you was that around social connection and relationships. How do you foster that within your own life and particularly, you know, during these times?
That has probably been my greatest challenge. I have noticed in myself, like I said, there's a real withdrawal because I haven't been around people the way I was, and because everything I do is now from home.
Mhm.
And the only connection, you know, in Melbourne lockdown, because some of them have been so strict, a lot of the time the only connection I have is with people in the dog park or the coffee
Mm,
shop, you know, or my son or the dog. I talk a lot to the dog. Um, so things like I really have to make, and like I said, it's an effort. I make a real effort to connect with friends. Like there's certain people that I'll make an effort to call every week, certain friends, and
mm,
I know that they're struggling with exactly the same things because we've talked about it. You know,
yeah,
some days you don't even want to get out of bed, let alone connect with people. But I know when I do make those connections and those calls, I always feel better. But I do, I must
yeah.
say, so there's a list of people that I make an effort to call every week. And I've got to say, often I will make those calls at the dog park while I'm
Mm,
walking, and
yeah,
I don't have video on, so they're phone calls. Um,
yeah.
because I've been reading a lot too. I think this is the other thing about text messaging and how text messaging has changed our lives and how we seem to default to it because it means we can control the conversation and
Mm,
the conversation doesn't go to a level of depth or it's contained on a text message, and it means that we can
mm,
stop and start it when we like, and that's it's not human. Like it's not innately how human connection evolves. So after reading that, I was like, far out, I never thought about it. And I was saying, you know, the best way to use text is to make plans, is to confirm plans. And one of the most powerful things you can do in COVID is rather than text someone and ask them if they're okay, is actually call them because it changes the
mm.
dynamic of the conversation and how they respond because they don't curate their response. They actually they have to verbalize it. So you're more likely to get the truth. And so that's
Absolutely.
what I've been trying to practice is how do I have voice conversations, not text conversations as much.
Yeah, and I guess, reading between the lines of what's actually unsaid in the texts, whereas you can't really do that. There's nowhere to hide in a phone call, really, you know, in terms of there's so many other signals of how someone is actually feeling. I know even in my own friendship group, because for me, often it's a time constraint because a lot of friends, I have been living here almost 10 years now, but still a lot of friends live in Ireland. But what we've
Uh,
taken to do now is voice notes, and I'm actually been finding that, really interesting as a way of communicating too, because I think you can hear a lot more in terms of what's going on for people within their voices. And also I think it's almost like, it feels to me like nearly a stream of consciousness journaling when people have that
Yeah.
voice note, because often what's said initially, kind of as they continue on, a lot kind of filters through that. Maybe I think what I hear is it feels like people wouldn't necessarily have written in a text or an email or what it is, but it's, after it's been going a little while, it all starts to unfold, which has been interesting.
It is.
But
And
I
I think,
found useful. Mm.
yeah, I think what's interesting, like I say, is the way we've evolved is how we try and curate conversations now through the technology that we have. And, I always think to myself, and I know you'll connect with this, is those magic moments of human connection, they generally happen in a moment and it's in random conversation that's not expected. And it's verbal conversation. But like you were saying, it's like when meetings start now, like, and I see it all the time. People, when you used to go into a meeting room with people, there'd be that banter before everyone settles, before everyone enters the room. Now, what happens when everyone gets on Zoom is it's like straight to business. So
Yeah.
all of those random interactions that we used to again take for granted, when you pass people in the corridor, in the workplace, it's that going away. It's really changed the dynamic of how we connect and how we feel. So the more I just sort of, my belief is from what I've read and the research is, the more you can cultivate that verbal connection, it's powerful. And it's interesting what you say about voice notes. I think that's interesting because I do a lot of voice notes, especially with my assistant. And some of the stuff that we've shared, it's been like, because she's in Canberra, I'm in Melbourne. But it's funny how it's like, oh my God, I forgot to tell you this really amazing thing happened. And because it's verbal, again, like you say, it's changed the dynamic of it.
Yeah, yeah. It's going to be an interesting one to see how things unfold. I would love to hope, and I know you're on a mission too, and part of a lot of the work that I do too is to bring people back to those those elements that you mentioned of just some simplicity of being present, connecting with other people, that happiness and joy and contentment, or whatever way you want to put it. It doesn't have to be this big out there thing. It's actually finding the gold in the mundane, often, which
So true.
yeah,
I would
yeah,
say
well.
happiness is not a goal, or is it, nor is it an end state. It's not a destination. It's a way of being. And again, that's why I start my day the way I do, because if I bring that being, that simplistic stuff into the start of my day, I can't control every day, but it's more likely to filter through how I feel and how my day plays out.
Beautiful. Well, I'm conscious of time. I feel like that has absolutely flown by, and I would love to sit here shooting the breeze with you all day. But before we go, I'd love to just hear, how it is that if we could be of service to you in one way today, what would that look like for you?
Oh my gosh, no one ever asked me. It's normally the other way around. That's so lovely. It'd be of service to me. I would say if anyone's listening and any of the conversation we've had resonates, or they've looked at my profile and anything resonates, send me a DM and let's connect. I'm really open to connecting with random strangers at the moment. There's a real magic in it. So yeah, I would say if you want to be of service, help me fill my human connection cup and just reach out.
Beautiful. And so if people do want to contact you or find out more about what you do, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best way?
You can DM me on Instagram, so hackinghappy.co, or you can have a look at the website, hackinghappy.co. They're probably the best means at the moment.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Penny. I've really enjoyed our chat this morning. Wishing you a wonderful rest of your week. Hoping we have some good news here in Melbourne very soon and a little bit more freedom.
I'm with
And
you.
yeah,
Thank you so much for having
I
me.
no worries. Thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, Penny. See ya.